Chapter 103, we're looking at choosing details. And again, it's a little bit of an art as to which bits and pieces you show. What you don't want to do is draw everything to a level of detail that is just going to waste your time, because the person fitting the cladding will really just need to know what's happening at the top and the bottom. So is it lifted off the ground, for example? Is there a trim that we need to consider? Is it a specialist piece of timber that needs special fixings? So those sorts of things. The person who's building the roof will need to know sort of what sort of finish the roof is having. Is it a single ply? Is it a triple ply? How is this finished at the edges? And it's all about the interaction between one and another bits of material. The person dealing with the stucco, okay, on this side, let's come around to this side. So they'll need to know, so, okay, well, how do I finish it at the top? This bit of roof looks like it's running all the way through, but I know that can't necessarily be the case. So what's going to happen at this point? Also, as I mentioned earlier, we've got the interaction between the stucco and the timber cladding. So these are questions that need to be raised. Now, when it comes to things like windows and doors, then we need to have a best guess solution for how these things are going to work, because ultimately we would send this window system and the door system off to a specialist supplier who would provide their own details, and their own team usually would come onto site and to fit these. What they would need to know is what they are fitting it to, whether it's going to be a concrete or a CMU, or whether it's going to be a timber frame building. They would then work out their own tolerances, the way they're going to be fitted, sealed, lapped in with various membranes, and then ultimately how it's going to look on the outside edge. So are there any extra trim provided? Maybe they have to make some pressed metal to fit to the inside, like I've proposed for this. But this might not be the ultimate solution. It might be a timber trim around the door and opening. So these sorts of decisions can be via discussion between you or the architect and the specialist contractor. Similarly, we've got this metal cladding. So that's going to be a different finish again. So what sort of length strips do these come in? Do we break it at there? Do they come in this sort of orientation? And then how are we going to deal with the joints? So when you are looking at choosing details for working up and providing more information, you want to look at what the similarities are between this building, and then pick various points that would answer more questions than just drawing a line through there and drawing a line through here and then choosing another part. Okay, so in this case, for this one, because I'm not going to draw many details, we're going to do 3 details in reality. I've decided to cut it at this point. So on one side, we've got the relationship between the stucco and the timber. And in reality, it kind of lines through, it doesn't step out. And on this side, we've got the relationship between the roof, the window, the cladding, and the door. So this is a nice place to take a cut, so we can see that relationship. Also, the relationship between the threshold and this slab. And in reality, I've dropped this slab down 6 inches. Now we might decide to ramp it up at this point, but I've left it 6 inches below the ground because, as far as I can find, code in America determines that the floor is usually 6 inches below. Now that could be proved to be completely wrong. I really did struggle to find a solution for this. It is different in the UK, where we'd have some sort of drainage system there and they'd encourage level thresholds. But again, you have to comply to code. You have to comply to any of the design constrictions that you might be facing if you're in a conservation area, for example, and they would have an effect on the details that you choose as well. But what we're trying to do here is look generally at the way in which this thing is going to work. And because I'm only using one, I've had to be quite sort of selective with the position of the cut. But in reality, everywhere that there's a change in direction or 2 things are meeting, some sort of explanation as to what's going there would be required. If we were looking at this edge butting into this, there would be all sorts of trims and flashings built into this. The stucco would overlap something, there'd be another trim, and then something would be lapped over the top of this, whether it's a lead or a soft metal flashing, for example. But the important point to drill home is that you should never think that you need to know absolutely everything. You need to be prepared to have conversations with people who know their products inside out, and they'll be more than happy to help you with the construction of certain elements. It's far better to call on the skills and expertise of people who do this day in, day out, rather than sort of rely on your own limited knowledge of something. Okay, so as far as choosing details go, we want to basically pick somewhere on this one, which is this point where I've got access to 1 connection, 2 connections, 3 connections, and then 4 connections, 5 connections, 6 connections, 7 connections, all in one cut. So that's a very brief introduction to the world of details and why we choose them. We're going to have a little look at scale and some of the other things that we need to consider next, and then we can start modeling this thing.